Hello, hello. This is Danny Green. Welcome to the National Guild of Hypnotists Washington chapter. We are so glad that you're here today. We're going to be recording this on YouTube, and I want to introduce Jodie Solberg, who is our speaker this evening. I'm going to take a moment to pin her so that we see her as she begins her presentation. Welcome, Jodie.
Thank you so much, Danny. Thank you for having me, everyone. I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit more about myself, but also about just some virtual hypnosis and best practices, because I have made the switch in these last few years into working basically primarily virtual. And so I wanted to share a little bit about what I've learned, some tips and some tricks and some techniques as far as the tech. Sometimes we have some issues with the tech, or some different systems that I have liked to use. So I thought that would be a good topic for you all to get to know me a little bit today, and so that we can connect, because not everybody is going to want to work virtually, and that's okay. Right? We all get to choose, but I think it's nice to know what other people are doing, and because then we can refer to them, or maybe you want to incorporate some virtual work, and it's nice to bounce ideas off of each other. And so I'll definitely be open to questions and discussion and talking about some of the things that have worked or haven't worked for us as we move forward. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Have some slides for you all. We're going to get fancy today. And I am going to see if I can get this to present or not. Speaking of tech issues, right? It's like, where is my present button? Here we go. I found it. It was hiding from me. I do these quite a bit, so usually I'm doing pretty good on there. But yeah, so today, just setting yourself up, setting your clients up, really for success, just planning and knowing kind of what to do and how to roll with the punches is, like I said, what we're going to talk about. So for me, I want to tell you my story, because most of you maybe know me a little bit. You've seen me around. I'm relatively new here in the group. And so I wanted to give you a little bit more in depth about my background. Now, this is what my office looks like. You can see the back of my office here behind me. This is actually the front. However, I actually have a desktop over here now. But that was right when I first moved in. This is actually our new home as of the last couple years here. And I'm going to go back, and then I'll tell you how I got to where I'm at now and why I'm working virtually. So I started my journey as a hypnotherapist actually in 2001. So I was in a doctoral program for clinical psychology down at Pacific University in Oregon, and they offered hypnosis as an option, because when you go into graduate school, they're having you choose what modalities do you want to use? What types of therapy would you like to practice? And prior to that, I was working with kids and families and people who were going through abuse and custody issues and crisis. And I was doing play therapy with children. I was giving recommendations to the court systems. And so my background was more social psychology, and then moving into clinical. And I knew that I always was really passionate about working with people as individuals, but also how they really move through their relationships, and specifically with people who were dealing with healing from abuse and other forms of trauma. And so I knew the types of people that I wanted to work with, and I really chose the types of therapy that I wanted to practice based on that. And so I chose cognitive behavioral therapy, which was all the rage in school. It was kind of the main path for most people. And then also Adlerian, because I was working, of course, like I said before, with families and children. And so that's where positive parenting techniques and things of that nature come from. So those were the things that I wanted to study. And I wanted to be a hypnotherapist. And the reason why that appealed to me so much was because you were able to get quicker results. with clients. So when you look at those studies that say, okay, you can, in 6 sessions with hypnosis, get similar results to, let's say, 24 sessions, which would be like 6 months, for example, with behavioral therapy, or much longer if you're looking at some other more traditional methods. I wanted my clients to be able to have the best possible results and the best possible rates of change that I could get them. I didn't want them to just be talking in circles around the same thing over and over again for 6 months at a time, and then get to 45 minutes in and say, okay, well, time's up, let's dive back in next week. I didn't want to only have that option. I wanted to be able to dive deeper into that inner healing with my clients. I wanted to be able to help them to get to the root cause of what was happening so that then they could make those changes and move forward. So that's what led me into studying hypnosis. And so I took classes in school at Pacific for that. We also became members of, at that time, what was called the Portland Academy of Hypnosis. So it was more clinical hypnosis training in a way. I wasn't trained in spiritual techniques necessarily. It was definitely more clinical and geared towards the psychology program that I was in. So that was my first training. And so I took that with me and was able to use that in my career. I have moved quite a few times. I have lived and worked in Arizona and Oregon and California. And of course, here in Washington, I've lived a few different places because my husband, who at the time we weren't quite married yet, got married the next year of when I started graduate school, but he is retired military. And so, he was in the Navy and we were moving a lot, and I was taking it with me, and I'd worked with all sorts of different kinds of people over the years. I worked with children again. I worked with teens in group homes and after school programs. I worked for many years with people who were going through issues with drug and alcohol convictions, and helping them after they got convicted, and courts and all of those things, like helping monitor their progress and recovery. I also worked with a lot of people with chronic pain and different diagnoses such as cancer. And so lots of things that across the board that were interesting to me. And the kind of the fun thing is, alongside my hypnotherapy and just my career as a therapist in general, I also had my own business as a consultant and a coach for people in business. And so alongside of that, I was very busy. I was teaching for a little while a class on professional interviewing and how to use those subliminal cues and be able to present yourself in the best light to get a job. And I also would go into places like banks or real estate offices or insurance offices and teach them those professional presenting techniques and kind of the psychology behind all of that, and those first impressions and how that works subconsciously. And so I was doing a lot of fun things that I really enjoyed, on top of what ended up being very sometimes heavy and stressful work. When I was working therapeutically, I had always for a long time worked with people, again, who were court appointed, for example, or in that kind of a system, or with nonprofit agencies. And so it could be really heavy and it could be really stressful. And I really enjoyed my coaching and consulting work. And so I kept doing it. I started it to pay off my 6 figures in student loans. And then I just kept going with that all of those years. Well, as you probably heard, that's a mouthful. That's a lot on anyone's plate. And especially with, again, my husband deploying all of the time and being gone most of every year, there was a lot happening. I also, my mother lives with us now, but I was taking care of her. I helped her retire after many years of dealing with cancer. So I was supporting her at the time. She didn't live with us yet, but I was helping support her. And so there was a lot that was happening in my life, and I really got burnt out. And I actually got burnt out a few times. And then I would take some time and I would recover. And then maybe, 6 years or so, 6 or 7, 8 years would go by, and then it would happen again. And so that happened in 2018. I actually had a bad car accident when I was commuting. I used to have offices in Linwood and Kirkland and Tukwila, sometimes a couple at the same time. And so I was commuting a lot. I was living in Linwood at the time. And so I was commuting down 405, and literally one day sitting in traffic, completely stopped, got hit by a big truck. So I had a long journey. That was in 2017, halfway through, it was around this time of year. And in 2018, my body wasn't healing the way that it really should have. I had hit a plateau with that and figured out that a lot of that had to do with that burnout. And so I tapped back into my skills, and I got some help from one of my fellow colleagues to figure out that I really needed to learn some lessons and make a major lifestyle shift. And so going into 2019, I had already figured that out and made a huge change in life. My mom had moved in with us in 2018 because she was having some health problems. And at the end of the year, my husband and I went on vacation between Christmas and New Year's. And he said, she's not going anywhere, right? We need to figure this out. And I said, okay, let's figure it out. And we needed a house without stairs. And we had vacation property up in Skagit County. And so we were going there on weekends with the dogs sometimes, and just basically going up to visit, and thought, oh, someday when we retire, we'll build a house there. Well, someday became 2019. And so we decided we're going to build a bigger one-story house. I was going to build an office specifically geared towards being able to work from home and work virtually. Now, I'd always wanted that. I always said that I wanted to have my own private practice when I turned 40. That was always my goal, is to work for 15 years, whatever it was when I made that goal, and for someone else, and then make that shift. And I always actually wanted to work from home, but 20 years ago, we didn't have that option. That wasn't a thing. And so we didn't have technology. We couldn't work on the computers. And so in 2019, when I was making these plans to build this house, I thought, you know what? I know I can do this, because in my coaching and consulting business, I do a lot of things online. And so I actually sought out some continuing education on how to make that happen. Also during this time, I reconnected, I guess I would say. I remembered about Mary Leela Bay. And I know Danny has studied with her as well. And she actually, when she was teaching at Bastyr and at Bellevue College, one of my friends who was a nutritional hypnotherapist was in her classes and studied with her. Actually, I had a couple friends who had studied with her. And so I kind of looked her up, because I had heard and I knew that she was actually working virtually already. And so I did some, education with her. I went through her certification programs to learn how to work online, but also brush up, of course, right? I love education. Some of us were chatting earlier before the meeting, and I love learning. So I love taking classes and doing new things. And she does a lot more on the spiritual side, which of course was an addition to what I had learned all those years ago when I first was becoming a hypnotherapist. And so I was able to learn a lot from her and study with her. And it was so universal timing. It was really, really interesting how that worked out, because around the same time that I was thinking about taking these classes with her, I ended up tearing a ligament in my knee. And so I was laid up. We went on a cruise, and in October, I think it was, of 2019. And I was supposed to start classes with her, I believe it was in November. And I stepped wrong going downstairs in the theater in the dark, because the show was going. And I think I got up to go to the restroom. I came back. I just twisted my ankle. My knee went snap, and I had to be wheelchaired home. So that was definitely a sign for me that, okay, maybe I should work virtually, because if I'm going to have these injuries, if these things are going to be happening that are taking me out, like, I need to have a way to work and to make a living. when I can't walk around and do those things. And so I ended up then, instead of going to her class in person, which I think I was originally going to, I ended up doing the virtual option. She had just started offering that. And so here you go from there. And that's actually how I met Danny. And I really, started rolling pretty much right away. I did some sessions in person still. I actually still had an in-person office until, oh gosh, 9 months after the pandemic started. Because that was the other thing. October, I tore my knee. I wasn't walking around fully until February. I remember starting to go to the gym to rehab my knee and really being able to do some movement in February. And March, everything shut down. Right. So, like I said, all these signs keep coming up for me all of a sudden. And so I was really glad that I was already in plans to set myself up to work virtually at that time. And of course, our house was almost done when everything shut down. And it was supposed to be done in June. And it wasn't done till December because everything shut down. But I still had my office. And so December 31st of 2020, I closed my office. I was able to get out of my lease, and, or sorry, 2021. I had it for another, no, it was 2020. I had it for 9 months. Yeah, that's right. I feel like don't you all feel like it's been so long? Like, I can't believe we're talking about 2+ years, right? It's been so long and so much has happened. So, December 31st, I had moved out of my office in Linwood and into my house in Skagit County. And so I get to work with a beautiful view now, and I get to work virtually. And so when we had to work virtually, I already was. And then when we were able to work in person again, I chose not to. So I chose not to go back and do that. And so what I want to share with you all, now that you know about me and what I'm doing with my life here, I wanted to share some lessons with you all that I have learned that have helped me along the way. Because you have trial and error, and you figure it out, and you go to the classes that are offered, and you try to figure out the tech, and you do all of those things. But I really wanted to share with you all just some of my experiences and some practices that I think have been really helpful for me. And so what we're going to talk about and learn about today is going to be some of the advantages and maybe some of the challenges of working virtually. I'm also going to talk about the tech, some of the tech things that have helped me, some of the tips and some of the tools and strategies, and then also how to market, because that was very different. Before I started working virtually, I was always networking, or I was getting referrals, or honestly, for many, many years, I was getting delivered clients because they were court ordered clients. And so I didn't actually have to go get clients as a therapist previously. And so for me, yes, I knew how to do that from a business standpoint, but it was a little bit different. So I want to talk to you all about that too. So it might help you. You may decide that you want to work, virtually part of the time, just offer one or the other. You might decide you're not interested, and that's okay too. But I think knowing about how I work and how some other people work is really helpful, because we can refer to each other. Or it may be something where you get that referral, it's out of state, and so they can't see you anyway. And so it's nice to be able to have those tools in your pocket in case you ever need them. Or if you're like me, and apparently you're accident prone, and you need to be off of your feet for a while, or you have a client who is physically unable to come and see you, I feel like those are all really great times to be able to, have these tools and use them. So, we can help a lot more people, because you can reach more people, a wide variety, other than people who are right here locally to you, right? By offering those virtual services as an option. And since the pandemic began, everything's been changing and in flux, and it is definitely getting better. But one thing that I've noticed is I still have clients now that we can travel, and people are doing that. There's a lot going around, and a lot of people are getting sick. I saw clients every week who, they're getting COVID, or they go travel and they come home sick, or someone in their family has COVID. And so they're having to stay home, or they're having to be a caregiver. And so modern technology just has allowed me to have that flexibility in the way that I work and to give my clients more options and to give them consistency, in case they aren't able to come in person, really being able to say, what, we can still have our sessions together. We can work around your schedule. It's much easier to do that if someone's, let's say, a parent or a caregiver of some kind, or really doesn't have a lot of time that they can take off work in the middle of the day. It can be really accessible to a lot of different people. And so my first tip is just going to be, if this is way out of your comfort zone, just start with tools that you're comfortable with. We're going to talk about different kinds of tools. And if there's something that you already use that's working for you, absolutely stick with that or build upon that. You don't have to step really far out of your comfort zone. It's just about expanding out, just learning and growing bit by bit to add on things that might make your life a little bit easier if you are going to work virtually. So we'll talk about 5 different areas today. And so the first one is just going to be the advantages. What are those advantages to being able to have the online sessions? I already just mentioned a few. If your client has an injury or an illness, or you do, and it's not necessarily something where you need to take time off, but it's harder to get around or it's more difficult to do in-person work, that's a great option. It also can help you reach more people, of course, like I mentioned, geographically. But in addition to that, the other thing that I've found since I've made that switch is that people can be in their own comfortable space. And a lot of times it can be an environment where they feel safe, right? And they're able to reduce some of the anxiety, perhaps, of being in an unfamiliar office, and closing their eyes in a new space with a new person, and maybe just feeling a little bit of hesitancy there, right? We can overcome some of that of them being in their own comfortable space, or they will have less stress, and you will, of not having to commute. Now, as I was building the house, I was still going to my office, even though I wasn't personally seeing people in person at the office, and I was doing things virtually. So if you have an office, you can absolutely do that too. But it takes some of that stress away from the client of having to get there and having to take as much time off, because they need to take the time it takes to get there and to get back, for example, from work or from home, or set up childcare for longer, or whatever the case might be. A lot of my clients now work from home and work virtually as well. And so they're already doing that. They're very, very comfortable with that means of seeing people. They're used to telehealth with doctors and doing meetings online. And so now I feel like there aren't the hurdles that I had in explaining to people that it was effective, and explaining to people that we could connect in a very similar way. And that, there were some benefits to that. I had to really play that up before the pandemic, and now I really don't have to. People really do understand that. And, it's less time for you, whether you're working in an office or working from at home in a home office. It's less time really per appointment, of you having to get somewhere, of you having to prep. It's nice because everything's just ready to go. I get notes maybe already ahead of time. But other than that, everything's at my fingertips, and I don't have to take the time either, which is nice. And I'm in my own comfortable space, which I like. There's also, if you are working from home, I know that was a concern for me as a woman, especially of, how am I going to, if I wanted to have a home office, how can I have clients at my house? Like, there's some security and some safety there. I also now live way out in the middle of nowhere. No one wants to come this far. So there's that. If you do choose to make that lifestyle shift, and you're like, hey, I want a snowbird and I want to go to Arizona half the year, or I want to move further out and semi-retire, you can absolutely do those kinds of things. But you have that security as well of not disclosing where your home is. For example, I work with a lot of people who, again, are coming out of abuse and do have, the abusers sometimes that they're co-parenting with and things of that nature. And so, I like not having that disclosed, just in case. For me, that safety and security with the people that I work with has always been important to me. And, really it's just that it's, pandemic proof in a way. If things happen again, if something else happens in the future and we have to shut things down again, it's nice to have it to pull out of your back pocket just in case. Challenges. Now, of course, there are challenges, right? There's challenges to all things. And so, some challenges that I've seen is you do need to coach them at the beginning to find the best time of day and the best space for them. For some of my clients, they do have their own office and they can close the door to their office and be undisturbed and say, hey, I have an appointment, and they won't get any interruptions. And sometimes that works. And then sometimes they're everyone works from home and we need to find a time where they can have their own quiet space and they can close the door and have that privacy. And so that's important, to really coach them through at the beginning. That first call is really my way to do that of, let's talk about the best space. Let's talk about the best time of day for you. Let's get that figured out. And then also you can coach them through the tech issues. I do my discovery calls, or whatever you want to call them, right? Those initial calls, I do those over Zoom because that's the mode that I use for my appointments, my sessions with them. And so I want them to get familiar with it so I can see what's going on around them and I can get a feel for, how tech savvy are they? Are we figuring it out? But if they don't know how to get the camera on, or they don't know how to position it, or they don't know how to do the sound, then I can walk them through that at that first appointment. So then when we get to the first hypnosis session, we have all the kinks worked out. So that's really helpful. So, the tech issues, the space, walking them through if they need, if somebody else could maybe hear from another room, headphones for them, if they need some more privacy. So I go through all of those things right at the beginning. And then, really figuring out where they're going to be, and then the positioning of the camera, for example, to make sure that you can see their cues. Right? That's important for us to be able to see their breathing pace, to see their expressions, to see any emotion that's coming up. Us being able to read that like we would if we were in person is important. And so then you can also walk through, where they're going to be, if they're going to lie down, if they're going to sit down, and make sure that you can see them properly. So you can make sure that you can do what you need to do in the session. And then a conversation, of course, ahead if the call's going to, it should drop. Now, I don't usually have too many issues with that. I really haven't had that happen during sessions. But, if there's an issue like that, what to do, like what the plan is, of just, hop right back in, or this is what we'll do instead. If you're really having a challenge, using a different type of, a video, instead of doing Zoom, hopping over on a different medium. So having a backup plan, I feel like is important if you have those challenges, because we all do from time to time. And it is important, of course, on your end to make sure that you have everything up and running really well so that the problems aren't on your side. So one of the challenges I have is being way out in the woods now, making sure I have backup internet, because I have internet through my cable. It's wired in, it's really good. But what if my internet goes down? What do I do? Right. And so I made sure that I actually do have a different personal phone and a different business phone. I just always like having that. But also, I figured out what the best carrier was in my area to have really rock solid internet with, actually, I can see the cell tower from my office window. And so I can plug it in. It can be a hotspot. I can plug it right in and I have solid internet if for some reason my hardwired internet decides to go down. So that's something I have done to overcome my own challenges with internet issues at my house. But you definitely want to see, what are yours? Maybe it is that you need to upgrade on the computer system, or you need to upgrade on one of the accounts that you have that you're using and making sure that it's running smoothly, or you need to have somebody who's an assistant who helps you with the tech. That may be something for you. And then eliminating distractions for both sides is really important too. So making sure, if you're going to be working virtually, that you have a space where you will not be interrupted. where you're going to make sure that there's not the noises in the background and the people coming in, because that's really, really key. I have now she was not a hypnotherapist, but I have a story for you all. One of my cousins who lives in Seattle sent me a message one day and she said, I need help with how to break up with my therapist. I said, okay, I can help you with wording. Like, what's going on? Tell me what's happening. And her challenge was that her therapist was having kids running around or people in the background or yeah, exactly. Dana's covering her eyes. Bad idea, right? Very unprofessional, right? Very unprofessional. So this was somebody that likely had to go virtual because of COVID and wasn't set up for it, right? Wasn't equipped to do this from her home. And so I think it's really important that if you're going to choose to do this, that you make sure that you have a dedicated office or that you have a door that you can close and that it looks professional. Danny has her beautiful background there. My office stays like this. So I want to make sure there's not clutter or, things like that. I don't want anything distracting. And we don't want anything that's going to take away from what you're doing, the work that you're doing with someone. So those are some of the challenges that I've seen and that I've seen other people have as well. And then, it's important to look at your bottom line. For me, I was paying a lot of money in office space. And now some people need that. And that's really important to them. And that is a priority then. Right? If you're somebody who doesn't have that kind of a space in your home, or you want to be able to see people in person and virtual, and you want to have a separate office space to do that, then that's an important expense for you. And absolutely, that is a good choice. Right? But for me, making that lifestyle shift for myself and realizing that I needed to remove myself from the stress and the go that I was always doing for so many years, and supporting and helping my family, in being able to move out here, it was important to me to be able to lose that office and not have those overhead expenses that I didn't need. Because for me, I felt comfortable with working virtually. And so, if that's for you, wonderful. That's something that you can make that choice for. And if it's not, again, that's okay too. Okay? It's really just going to be individual for each one of us. And then your tech expenses, right? There are going to be some things that you need paid accounts for. They're not too much, but that's something you want to look at, if that's something you want to add to your expenses in your business and your practice. And then, time efficiency, being able to see, more people, or in my case, being able to see, sometimes less people and take more breaks in between, whatever is going to work best for you in your life and everything else you have going on, then making it as time effective as possible, putting some of those virtual sessions in there might be helpful for that. My husband now, still travels a lot for work and sometimes is gone for longer periods of the time. Like, short story is basically he does the same thing he did when he was active duty. He just now does it for the government and isn't active duty anymore. So basically, sometimes he travels a lot. I love to be able to go and work from anywhere. I love to be able to do that. I love to be able to say, hey, like, I'll come spend time and be able to work. Or if I want to travel, and there's so many more people that are more nomadic nowadays, right? Then I can do that. So for me, it's really efficient on time because I can still work. Like, no matter where I'm at, if he's at work, I can do some sessions with clients and then I can be done. Right? And then we talked about the pandemic proof. So tech tools, I wanted to talk to you about tech tools and the things that I like to use. So we're on one of them, which is Zoom. Zoom is a great platform. You can really put some things in place. If you look at HIPAA, some of us, don't have that requirement to be HIPAA compliant, but I like to know that things are secure, and I like to know that things are private, and you may have those requirements. So I will just mention it a little bit so that you'll know that yes, you can set up HIPAA compliance on Zoom. For example, what they really they require a couple things. There's an encryption that they require, and Zoom does have that. And then if you have to be HIPAA compliant, there's a healthcare compliance agreement. And Zoom does offer that if you need that, basically. But what I do to just make sure things are a little more secure, because when everybody started using Zoom, I'm sure you all heard about people getting hijacked and all of these things happen and getting interrupted. And that was because there's such a thing as a personal meeting room and a personal link to that. And then there's the custom ones when you schedule a new meeting each time. So I don't use the one where it would be the same link every single time for people to see me. I create custom links for a specific client, or just a new randomly generated link every single appointment, so that there's more privacy. No one else has that link except for that person that I'm going to be meeting. So I make sure that there's that security. Also putting the passwords and the waiting rooms in place are really helpful for that, because then who's coming in. If somebody random comes into the waiting room, obviously we're not bringing them in. And so if somebody accidentally, put the wrong code in or something happened, you're not ever getting interrupted, and there's more security there. So that is really helpful for me. But there are other platforms that people can use too. Google Meet or WebEx, there are different things. There's even that level of encryption, HIPAA compliant, but there's also that level of, encryption on things like if you get kicked off of Zoom or something's going wrong that day, you can use an iPhone and message that way, and do that, or Facebook Messenger, things like that. There are options. So just maybe have a primary and a secondary. Like if we get kicked off, this is what will happen, or over the phone, or whatever you decide. I like to see people, like to do work over the phone, but that's something that is also obviously an option if you're just needing to close out or something. And then I really think that if you're doing recordings for clients, it's nice to have a secure place to put recordings for clients where you can send them a link. So if you happen to be doing that, Dropbox or Google Drive are good options for that. Scheduling, I really like Calendly. That's my personal preference. There's a lot of different online schedulers, out there, but Calendly is my favorite, just because I can put a lot of information in there. I can ask questions in there about what they want to focus on for that session. They can reschedule, and I can have it linked to my Google Calendar, so it will show when I'm available and when I'm not available. So they can book an appointment, they can reschedule an appointment. You can set it up to where they can pay right there ahead of time for the appointment, and it links with the Zoom. So all of those things, the fact that it integrates so well, are things that I really enjoy about it. So that's why I use that. And then the other thing that I really like, because you want to make sure I make the experience as similar to when people were seeing me in person as possible. So of course we need to get our paperwork filled out, right? Our intake forms, our disclosure forms, and send our privacy documents and all of that. So I personally really like to use fillable PDF forms. So Adobe can help you with the fillable PDF forms, and they'll be able to sign. I think all of these things are relatively inexpensive. It's maybe $10 or $15 a month or something. So they're pretty, low price as far as that goes. And the nice thing is with those Adobe forms, if you need the HIPAA compliance, they have that as well. So that would work for you. So just knowing that, having, your email and the online scheduler and the video platform and those secure forms, I want to make sure that they're getting that full experience and that I'm not cutting corners anywhere. And so I set up my tools that way. I remember at the beginning, I would email them my forms that I had in person before, but they weren't fillable. So then they'd have to print them out and fill them out and then take a picture or send it back or however. And I figured out a lot of people don't have printers anymore. right? They don't have access to these things. And so that was something I learned with trial and error, that, okay, I need to find an easier way for people to fill things out online. And so that's where I ended up with Adobe. And then marketing. So like I said, I was doing a lot of in-person, networking on the coaching and consulting side before. I really didn't have to go out and look for clients on the therapy side before much. And so for me, marketing for hypnotherapy, and as a hypnotist was different for me. And so a website and doing a blog, those were things I started doing in 2019, basically, going into 2020, and now I've been doing more speaking. So guest speaking, there's a lot of virtual networking. Of course, there's more in person again now, so you can do that too. But guest speaking on podcasts or in other people's groups. I actually traded. I have a Facebook group of my own, and I traded guest speaking with a gut health coach. And so she came into my group this morning and talking about the physical side, because we both talk so much about mind body connection. We talk about holding on to trauma and stress. And so it was a good fit. And she was somebody I met through online networking and a referral group that I was in. And we said, hey, we'll go into each other's groups and share our audiences. And so that's a really great way that I like to go out and market for myself. And then, print and media mentions. There's these really neat websites where reporters are looking for people to contribute to articles. It's called HARO. It's HARO. It's Help a Reporter Out. And so if you Google that, it'll pop right up. But basically, you can narrow the focus to be, whatever your focus is. And it can be on lifestyle, it can be on health, it can be, whatever interests you or things that you feel like you could write about. The exciting thing is whenever you are guest speaking or whenever you're giving a quote for these writers or, helping them write an article or anything like that, your name, your website, your contact information, what you do is going to be listed. And so the more people that see what you do, the better, which is also another reason why, if you're wanting to take your marketing and spread it outside of your immediate local area, you'll want to probably have something virtual, whether that is a course or whether that is a one-on-one session or a group that you do. Okay, whatever the case may be that you decide, okay, that's the thing I'm going to do virtually, having some kind of an option for people to see when they go to your website, if you're doing something that's going to be seen outside of your immediate local area is really important, right? You want them to be able to go to your website and see that there's some way they can work with you, basically. And so that's something that's been really helpful. And then books. I've contributed now to chapters in a few different books about different things that I have experienced, and the work that I've done with clients, just lessons learned, things of that nature, and all of my information's in there. And guest blogging. There's so many different things now than we had before. I feel like this whole world has opened up to me of all of these different virtual tools that I never even thought about before. I never thought of myself as a speaker. Now I'm on a bunch of speaking tours that are virtual. So I'm reaching all these different people. And every time they see me, it's, this is me. This is what I do. This is how I help people. And they're seeing this. And I never would have thought of myself as a writer or a speaker before. But that is something I really got into through the pandemic. Because again, I got shut down on being able to really go to those in-person networking groups. And so I needed to find a new way. The other thing that I really like is for online virtual networking, if you all are interested, is there's a group and they have different, global and then just, in our country and in our state, different networking meetings. And it's called the Happy Neighborhood Project.
Called
so that's
what?
Happy Neighborhood Project. And so that is one where they have a lot of different kinds of groups, and you can literally go into any state. If you can work with people in other states, you can go and join their networking groups. You can find what works for you. I actually was referred to that one by somebody who's in Hawaii. And she said, hey, they have one for Washington. They have one that's global. And then you could just get put into individual, little chat rooms within Facebook. So you're still doing more intimate networking where you're getting to know people on a more personal level, which I like. I don't like being in these huge ones where it's just like, you get lost in the sea of people. But I like that they separate everyone out into small groups so that they can get to know each other and share contact information. And so those are fun things that I said I've learned about since the pandemic started of networking and ways to get my name out there that I'm still continuing now. So I just enjoy them. And then of course, you can start your own networking. I know there's some people in here that do Meetup. So meetup groups, and you can do those online or in person. I mean, there's so many different options nowadays. All right, so our keys, right? What are our keys to success here? Is learning all the things you need to know to manage working virtually in your business. All of that marketing. How are you going to market yourself? What do you need for the tech, right? What are the tech tools that you're going to need? What are the costs going to be that are associated with that? That's under your business management too, and figuring out what's going to be the best fit for you. Again, I would start with what you're comfortable with and then go from there, right? What do you already use that could work for you, and what seems user friendly to you? It's really so much harder to try to learn something totally new that seems absolutely not intuitive to you. And so, try to figure out something that you can do already and then just build upon it. And then clients, how are you going to store all of those files in Dropbox or your Google Drive? Or I have an actual physical hard drive that I plug in that I save files on as well. So I have that. I do a lot of things technical, but I still like to have backups for my backups. If you don't trust it, you can have paper still if you want. But I think that that's important too, of, still managing your notes and your client files and the things that you're doing, the appointments and the invoicing and all those forms that they're just sending you on fillable PDFs and all of that. Make sure that you have your systems in place for all of those three key pieces. As long as you have systems, honestly, this moves really easily and smoothly if you set your systems up in place. So that's where you're setting yourself up for success ahead of time and being mentally prepared and physically prepared for the shift if you're adding this on. And also getting your clients, of course, mentally prepared and making sure that they're having all the forms and knowing what to expect as well. And so that's really it. I found a great quote for us all. This is Eric Hall is actually on the board of one of the big Alzheimer foundations. And he was talking about telehealth, but it applies to us too. That these virtual appointments, right, that they really leave people, is what he was talking about. They leave our clients, our potential clients, our audience, the people that need our help, right, with no excuses to find the help that they need, right, for themselves, no matter where they are in the world. You may have a client who lives somewhere like me out in the middle of nowhere, right, who really needs the help. But that distance and that time for them could be prohibitive for them to be able to see you. And so giving a little bit of flexibility in your options, giving a little bit of that consistency and that support for someone who really needs it, but maybe has a hard time with the childcare or getting the time off work or is out of state from you, but really connects with you and is that ideal client. Like I said, we can really help people from all over through that. And the last thing I wanted to say is that as you're growing, and you're able to fit more people in potentially by working virtually, or you can just limit your schedule and work less if you want to do that too. But you may fill up, right? Your schedule might be filling up. And so what I found and why I'm so happy to do this today is really that I wanted to join this group with all of you because I was actually part of NGH since 2019. But I recently figured out that you all were here, right, this past year. And so it was really important to me to connect. And I like to come to the meetings as often as I can because I want to get to know all of you. And I love that the people who've been presenting have been talking about what do they do, and who do they help. And so I think the strength that I've seen in the group is the connection with each other and being able to have that referral network, to have the providers outside of hypnosis, that do the things that our clients may need and being able to refer to them in that regard, but then also being able to refer to each other. If there's someone who specializes in something different than you do, or if your schedule's full, being able to refer out, or if somebody does prefer in person, I have you all, that now I can refer to in their area potentially, or if somebody wants to work virtually and it's just not your cup of tea, then you'll know that I do that. And so I think having, the tools to pivot if needed, but also having the ability to refer based on client preference, if they, have one preference or another, or if they're in a different area than we are, is really great. So I just wanted to say thank you for really just welcoming me in. And here's my last slide for you. Let's connect. I put social media on there because we've been talking about that, and that is another way that I do market. But my email's on here. And so you all will be able to find me, obviously, on the NGHWA website. You can get my contact information there, but I did want to invite you, if you wanted to reach out to me, if you wanted to connect, if you wanted to talk one-on-one and get to know each other, email is probably the easiest. So, feel free to send me an email and let's talk more, because I'd love to get to know each and every one of you. So there you go. There's my presentation. And now, if anyone has questions or wants to, talk about their experience and whether they work virtually or not, I would love to hear.
I don't work virtually very often at all, but and something you said helped a lot. I hadn't really considered this too much. When I did work virtually, I had to figure out how to email the client paperwork that they needed to take care of. So checking into the Adobe PDF sounds like it'd be a really good thing. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, like I said, I just wanted to share like what kind of stumbling blocks have I run into, and that was definitely one of them. And I know, Danny, I saw your head nodding when I was talking about that's a struggle when you first are like, okay, how do I get them to get this back to me in time? And yeah, how do I get that filled out? But yeah, Adobe, I said, isn't very much. I want to say I pay, because now Word and everything is subscription based instead of just buying the software. Don't you all miss the days when you could just buy the disc and be done with it, right? And now everything updates constantly. I want to say it's something like $16.95 a month, something like that.
How
so
much?
Not $16.95, so maybe $17 ish.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's right around there. I always see the thing pop up, the invoice that tells me, oh, we just paid this. So I think that's what it is.
And
Okay.
so what I did with that, I did a Outlook form just for my intake form, just
Okay.
for my intake, and they're typing in their signature. I have a statement that says that counts as their signature. So that was nice. It was free, just for that one form, and the rest are just for them to read.
Yeah, and so that's a good option. Thank you, Danny, because that's a good option. I use the PDF software for different things too. So if I need to edit some different things, and so it made sense for me to pay for that. But if you're not doing it very often, and or you're just doing that one thing, then Outlook sounds like a great plan. I know that there are other things out there. There's I don't know security wise, I haven't looked into them, but Google is usually pretty good for security, and they have Google Forms or Jot Forms. Is what there's another one is JOT Forms, and they have free versions of those where you can have them fill out the form. And like Danny said, that's a great tip, is make sure if it's not an ability to actually sign and they're just typing, you just have a statement in there that does say, because I've seen those when I fill things out for doctor's offices or I fill things out for any other business, it will say like, type your name, like this counts as your signature so that it's illegal. Right? That's smart.
Exactly. And so you did clinical psychology and, hypnotherapy through your school. You took
Yep.
general hypnosis through Mary Lee LeBay. What other modalities do you use?
Besides for hypnosis?
Yeah, for hypnosis.
Oh, in hypnosis. Well, I did some other, I forgot to mention this. So when I first joined NGH, I also have done a bunch of different courses and certifications with the Mott and Johnson Institute as well, through, which I got connected with through NGH. So I've done a lot of that. So some of my studies with them, particularly because I had already been working with children, I did their pediatric hypnosis. Of course, I work with a lot of women. And so, going through childbirth and postpartum issues. So I've done some certifications in that area. And then also working with people with trauma. I did a certification with PTSD and then with caregivers. And that was really important. So kind of covering some of the different, and then of course, working with people with addictions, kind of covering all the bases, because that was all of my experience and the people that I had so much work that I'd done with. And so I thought that those would be great opportunities to just take a little more continuing education, specifically with those people, dealing with those issues when it came to hypnosis. And then I'm still utilizing, so much of what we do nowadays anyway has a lot to do with CBT, with cognitive behavioral therapy, all the mindfulness. And a lot of that comes from CBT and DBT and things like that. And so, I'm definitely using a lot of those mindfulness techniques. I think we probably all use a lot of them in hypnosis already. And so I definitely still am using quite a bit of that. And when I don't often work with kids anymore. Now I work mainly, I would say 90% with adult women at this point. But I will have men that are clients that have some of those issues. A lot of people who've been through abuse, and that includes men, right? When they're as children or in relationships or whatever the case may be, will have issues with addictions, whether that's substances or emotional eating, whatever that case may be. Of course, that can definitely be something that they lean into as coping strategies, and it can continue on in their lives. And so, that's something, sometimes I'll have men who will come to me and say, I'm having these issues. I am still trying to deal with bullying or child abuse or, different things. And so it's more the type of issues that I work on than anything. If they still see me online, because I am listed on the different therapy sites, and so if they find me on there, for example, and really resonate with what I talk about and those issues that I work with, they want to work on relationships, things like that, they'll can come to me in that capacity. And with kids, it's more referrals from parents. So for example, I'll be working again, like I mentioned earlier, with women who maybe are co-parenting with their abusers. Unfortunately, that happens a lot. And so, they will get their own personal work done, but they'll want help with how to, parent their child. I did a lot of, parenting training and coaching when I was working with families. And so, how do I work with my child? And try to help them through this, because they're having to deal with going back and re-traumatized and all of that. So I'll help with that. I also have had some clients who had said later, can you work directly with my child? And I can help with that too, with the families, because I do have that experience. And so sometimes that'll happen, but again, usually it comes from the woman, that's referring someone to come in. But just know that if you're referring someone, yes, I can work with men and work with kids, but mostly I'm working with adult women at this point.
Great, Jodie. We're going to stop the recording in just a few minutes, but does anyone have any other questions that will be helpful for our group?
You did a really good job of explaining this.
Yeah.
Thank
And there's a
you.
lot of things that I'm going to be checking out.
Yeah, definitely some things. So out of everybody who's here, who I know, DL said a couple times people are out of state. He's worked a little bit, but not a lot. It's not his preference, right? With online. And Danny kind of gives options. It sounded like earlier. But Margot and Barbara and Aaron, how about you? Do you have you worked virtually, or is that something you like to do or don't like to do?
So Aaron, you're muted.
You're muted, honey.
Let's go ahead and just call on Margot, and then we'll just go across the screen. Margot, I know you're retired, so
Yeah.
you're just here for the information, and we love
You're
you
just
so
here to be with us and to learn.
Yes. Yes.
That's great.
very
What do
much.
you what are your thoughts?
Oh, well, I just thought you did a lovely job of covering, the technical and the side of everything, which can be a stumbling block
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot of things.
I'm very glad.
Always
Thank you.
kind of tempted. Oh, should I go back? Should I go back?
Yeah, you should.
But I'm pretty busy, so.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Margot.
Yeah.
And Aaron, I know your modality's in person. Is there any virtual aspect?
Not in the quantum healing technique, but I have worked virtually in the past with regular behavioral hypnosis. Yeah. And it was okay. It was fine. It was good.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I would not hesitate to do that sort of hypnosis again. But with quantum stuff, it's a little more challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just
and so there might be some
physicality.
people that you don't want to schedule that way. You're going to say, if I'm working with this person, with these quantum healing techniques, then no.
Mhm.
But like you said, you've done it before. And so if you have somebody where they need to work virtually, you can fall back on that.
I could. It's a different type of hypnosis, but yeah, I can do it all. But I loved your presentation. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you for the feedback.
Well, I normally teach at Northwest Hospital because I teach hypnobirthing, Jodie.
Mhm.
I teach for the state of Washington for Great Starts, Parent Trust for Washington Children. And once COVID started, the hospital did not want our families to be coming into the hospital. So I had been working on Zoom or Skype with people all over the world with prenatal bonding, which is my specialty. And I find the internet just wonderful to be able to connect with everybody around the world. And I was a little worried in the beginning how things were going to work with the classes, the hypnobirthing classes. But in all reality, the students love it because they can be in their beds and I put them to sleep at night.
Yeah.
By the end of class, they do their relaxation CDs. They're very attentive during class. I've been able to handle a larger group. This summer I had classes of 15 couples taking the childbirth class, where I would have only had 10 couples fit in the room that I had at the hospital. And people were able to take the course. I had one person that took it from Colorado, another one from California that realized it was an online. And people that are up in the mountains, if they had to drive down to get to the class, they wouldn't be able to take the class. So I heard there was scuttlebutt that we might be going back to the hospital. And if we do, I really have in my mind that I'm going to continue an online hypnobirthing class, because hypnobirthing has found that it's been so successful, the crossover, that people are able to take it that wouldn't normally be able to. So I'm leaving that door open, and I've really loved it. It's worked really well.
Yeah. And that, like you said, then you can offer an option. So if you're going back into the hospital, you just offer options and leave that, because you found that it can be just as effective and it offers options to people who wouldn't be able to do it. otherwise.
It's a little hard when you're helping somebody with breastfeeding. So I
Yeah,
prefer
that
to
might be
go.
helpful. Yeah,
Yeah, I prefer to
I
go
can
to
see
the
that.
house and, you know, and be a
Mhm.
little bit closer to them.
Yeah.
But because touch is always good. But even in COVID, you know, people didn't want you coming into their home.
Yeah.
So so the virtual has made it possible for a lot of people to be educated on the net. So I think it's fabulous. So
Yeah, and
I don't blame you at all for switching over and just doing your work virtually, because you're there to listen.
mhm, and it works for me, and it just works for my family, and for, you know, the lifestyle that, you know, we decided we wanted to slow down and be able to, you know, travel and do some of these other things, and so it really just supports that, and so, you know, I never would have been able to do something like that previously, and so you're right, technology has just opened options so that if you ever have the need to do that, or again, if things ebb and flow and something, you know, causes a shutdown again, or you are referred someone who can't make it to you. I just like having that again just in your back pocket if you need it.
Absolutely,
Knowing
absolutely.
that that's an option, and hearing, I love hearing from you, Barbara, that that has been effective for you, and that even if you go back to the hospital, you're still going to do that. People are so used to it now. Everyone's used to working on Zoom. And so when I tell them, and I do, you know, people will ask and I say, well, I'm only working virtually. So, you know, I set up the call with them, and, you know, if they want someone in person, then now I have some options of people that I can refer to. And I really do appreciate that.
Yep. So I work in prenatal psychology, pre and perinatal psychology, and I spent 20 to 30 weeks with my couples going through the whole pregnancy, bonding with their babies. And I'm trained by a German psychiatrist. And next year, if all goes well, I will be one, team teach.
Mhm.
So we'll be training facilitators next year, if all goes
Great,
well.
Barbara.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's so exciting.
Beautiful.
Such
Yeah, because there's
important work.
nobody else doing it in the United
Yeah.
States. It's very popular in Europe, in
Mm.
Germany, in Switzerland, and Hungary. It's very popular, and insurance pays for it because we're bonding these families together before the baby comes out, and they don't have any trouble being parents.
Yeah, and that's the best.
Wait, insurance in America or insurance in
No,
Europe?
in Germany. In
Ah.
Germany. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, they're not paying for it here.
No,
And I have
no.
to,
Yeah.
here you have to be licensed and so forth, you know,
Mhm.
to get
Mhm.
onto it. And so that won't happen. But it is a passion, and the outcomes are worth every second that you spend with your families. Yeah.
I bet. That's incredible.
That's so
Well,
great.
Mm.
And you know, thank you
oh,
so much for everyone sharing. I think that in this recording, you guys have gotten kind of a little bit about each of us.
mhm.
And I hope that you all find that beneficial. So thank you so much for being with us today. And we normally meet the second Thursday of the month. And Erin, did you have a comment or a question before I sign off on the
Well,
recording?
I just had a question. What if you have a client that when you're working with them in hypnosis, they're in distress? How do you deal with that?
So how would you deal with it if you were in person?
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I know how I would do that, but I guess, okay, all right.
You talk them down.
Mm-hmm. You
Yeah.
talk it down, because even if you were in person, you know, again, there's some modalities, you know, there's different people who use hypnosis with other things that they do. And so, yeah, you need to be able to touch someone. Working virtually doesn't work very well, but you talk them down. Absolutely. If they're getting emotional, if they're getting upset, then, you know, it's your calming, soothing voice, it's your tone, it's your words, it's those things that you would use in person that you're going to use exactly the same way.
And
Okay.
I'll just share one experience that I had. I had actually someone's computer camera fail halfway through our hypnosis session. So I didn't say a word. We didn't start over, but I was listening so intently and actually closing my eyes and using a deeper sense of intuition to read the client because I couldn't see their face. And we were able to finish the session. The client had no idea her camera had stopped. And so even if the camera doesn't work, sometimes your senses are just so awake to helping that client anyway that it goes just fine.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. When those things happen, it's really important just to stay calm and roll with it and not get flustered. You know, that is definitely our job on this side of the camera is to make sure that they stay calm and not stressed or not anxious about that. Like you said, you just keep going and it's going to be okay. And if there's some noise that happens, you just mute yourself for a second, take a pause, turn it back on. Like it's going to be okay. And I make sure in my inductions to really set it up for them that, if they hear a noise, or if there's talking outside the room, all of those things that we'll say about, it's just the world going about just the way that it should, even while you're relaxing, even while you're taking care of yourself, not to worry, to just allow those things, to allow them to go deeper, all of those things that we would do, even in an office setting, I do that too. And I'll pinpoint sometimes, if I know that there's certain distractions that are outside the room for them, or things that were stressing them before they got there, it's the same way. I'll pinpoint those things and say, if you hear this or if you hear that, or, make sure to relax and release all the stress before you got here today. All of those things that you would do, you just do them virtually. And those are worries that I think we all have when we start doing this, but then you figure out pretty quickly, it really isn't different.
Exactly. And anything else?
No,
Oh,
thank
okay, great. Well, just for time's sake, I'm going to stop the recording, but please do stay on.